Good morning, mamas. Welcome to Mom's Table, where we cry, laugh, scream, play, love our kids, yet struggle with motherhood that isn't talked about often. Grab a snack, a drink of choice, and get comfy. I'm your host, Janett, and today's episode is the story of how I met my husband and my 2 pregnancies. I hope your day was fantastic. And I hope you have a great Thursday. Since a lot has happened since the last episode we launched, and thank you guys so much for the support. Really appreciate it. But yeah, so a lot of you guys have asked about a story time about my husband and how we met. I'm just relaxing on my couch with my blanket that my mother-in-law got me and my Dr. Pepper. You know I gotta have my Dr. Pepper. So let's take it back about 7 years ago. In May, I actually was in, May of 2016, I was actually still in a relationship that I had since high school for about 2.5 years at this point, and I genuinely thought I was going to marry this boy, because I loved him, and for security purposes and identity purposes, we'll just call him Jack, okay? So I thought that I loved Jack. I thought that I was going to be with him forever, and something just didn't feel right. I trusted my gut, and he had 2 Apple devices at the time, and he had went into the restroom, and I just had an inkling that something was going on. So I checked his iPod, and there was text messages between him and this girl. I didn't know this girl at all, and I knew he worked with her. That's all I knew. And there was messages along the way about him coming to meet her parents, and wouldn't his girlfriend at the time, which was me, get angry, and all of this negative connotation towards me. And it kind of felt off either way, between him and I. So I was like, okay. And at that point, I had confronted him about it. He got mad because I went through his stuff. And I mean, in general, just the way his parents treated me, they were really nice to the very end. But because I wouldn't do certain, I wouldn't do it their way all the time. And so personally, I was like, okay, Jack, you and I are done. We're done. I was devastated. This was in May. Okay, May of 2016. And then I used to play this game called Dark Ages, and my husband and I at the time, my husband now, we would play almost every day or every other day or whatever, and we would chit chat and hunt and play the game as one would. And we got to know each other on a more personal level, and I kind of expressed hey, this is no longer it, between Jack and I. And he's like, oh, okay. And so we really gravitated towards each other, and we knew each other 2 to 3 years prior. So for the length of Jack and I's relationship, that's literally what, we knew each other, but we just didn't really give the time of day the way that we did whenever Jack and I had broken up. So come July time, my grandmother, my Nana, she's in the hospital, and it's really, really bad. It was quite scary, literally. My mom, she was exhausted, so I offered to go ahead and stay there at the hospital, and I remember being awake for 48 hours because it was every night was a hard night. We exchanged phone numbers, and we start texting and calling, and one day he's like, hey, I want to go visit you, because he knew that my grandmother was, sick and stuff like that. And he was like, hey, I want to come visit you. And I'm like, no, this isn't a good time right now. I really don't think it would be appropriate. So So he's like, well, please, I really want to. And I'm like, at this point, I don't even let my family know because of all the stuff that's going on. And I lived in my own apartment with my sister, and I had a local credit union job. And so I don't let anyone know. I kind of just like, yeah, sure, like, go ahead. Mind you, I was like 21 at this point, 20, almost 21. And fast forward till whenever he actually comes down, and we're hanging out, you know, and I tell him, like, he drives 1,600 miles from Florida, and I still haven't told anyone, and he finally gets to Texas, and I'm still working at this point. So there's like a strip mall, and then my local credit union, and a few other banks around. And I tell him, okay, park in the parking lot around, you know, I don't know, this store, and just wait for me. I apologize. I didn't think that I was going to still be at work whenever you got here. He was like, yeah, no, that's fine. I can sleep in my truck. And I was like, well, you have a hotel. And he was like, yeah, but I couldn't find it. So I'm like, okay, well, this guy can't even find a hotel. I, you know, finished throughout the day, and then I finished my day at work, and then I'm like, okay, I'm this blue car. Follow me to your hotel so I can show you where you're going to be staying. He was staying multiple days, but he only booked for one day. I'm like, okay, well, let's see how the first day goes. Maybe he'll want to leave after the first day. And mind you, I just got out of a relationship which I thought was long-term, and I just didn't want to find anything, honestly. Like, I had that in my head that I was not ready for a relationship and that I didn't want anything. You know, so in the hotel room, his mom calls, and she's like, well, how's it going? And then I remember my mother-in-law saying, you better not kill my son. I don't know if you're a serial killer. And I'm like, no, ma'am, I am not. And, you know, that's obviously why I didn't tell my parents, or my family, which I probably should, just like in hindsight, but I didn't. So that night come around, you know, he slept in the hotel. I went to my apartment for dinner that night. I was like, okay, let's go to, I think it was like Logan's Roadhouse. Oh my gosh, Logan's. Because it was close by to the hotel and close by to my apartment relatively. So we go, but I invite my sister, and as we were driving there, I tell my sister, like, hey, so my friend from Dark Ages came down. He came to visit. Like, are you cool meeting him? And she's like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And then she, like, absolutely falls in love with him, and is like, oh yeah, like, he's very nice, like, is just boasting about him. And I told her that, like, she's the only one that knows. I go on about my days because I still had to work, right? Because this was literally a last minute trip. And so I took the time to tell my sister. I went back to the apartment, he went back to the hotel, and we slept. And then we met up, I think, like, in the morning to have breakfast. And my sister was like, well, why don't you just let him stay in the apartment? I was like, Terry, no, like, we barely just met this man. And he was like, yeah, but she was like, yeah, but I think he's a very nice guy. He won't do anything. And I was like, no. We did go ahead and let him stay in our apartment, which again sounds like a crazy thing that we would do. I don't know exactly when, but I want to say 2 days before or the day before, my grandmother had came home from the hospital, and we had went to a Starbucks at a certain location. My mom and myself and my husband Josh, and we, you know, my mom wanted all the details, like, why are you here, what are you doing, because eventually I had to tell her, right, because she wanted to go out and do things, and I was like, well, I also have this person here. And so we started talking, they started talking and they absolutely fell in love with him. And slowly but surely, like literally at that Starbucks, it was like my mom met him, and then the guy that my mom was dating at the time, she met him, and the guy that my mom was dating was in our lives for a while now. And then my brother Matthew, my youngest brother, he came and met him, I think. And then my best friend Joelle, he came and met Josh, and then of course Terry was there, and everyone fell in love with him. And then my mom, I kid you not, that night was like, "You're gonna marry that man." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And she was like, "You're gonna marry that man." And I was like, "Mom, don't say that. Like, I'm not ready for marriage. I'm not ready for anything, given the fact that Jack and I just broke up and all of this." And she's like, "No, you are going to marry that man." I was like, "No, I'm not. Like, stop saying that." Well, come July 30th of 2016, he is getting ready to leave, right? And he's like, "Will you be my girlfriend?" And I'm like, I really had to think about it, and I felt bad for how long, like, I left him, like, thinking about it. And I was like, "Sure, like, I'll be your girlfriend." And I was like, how bad can a long distance relationship be with a person that you just met, right? And I was kind of naive. And he's getting into his truck. He's already like upset, visibly upset, and he's crying, and he calls his mom and says, "Mama, I don't want to leave this woman. She's my home. Like, she feels like home." And he starts crying, and he's like, he tells his mom he loves me. And his mom texts me and says, "You are one special lady to my son." And I'm like, I just met him. I felt the same way. Like, believe me, whenever I saw him get out of the truck, it was like true love at first sight. But at the same point, I was guarding myself, and I was like, okay, well, I just got out of a relationship. I don't want to get hurt again. Is it, like, I kept self-doubting. I was like, is it worth it? Is it this or that? And then I just took that leap of faith, because I knew in that moment that he was the one. And I don't know how to explain it. It's just like whenever I looked at him, I saw no worries, and I saw just easy. Like, it's gonna be easy, and it has been. I just knew in that moment that he was the one, and that I needed to be with him. And he genuinely, from that point on, has shown me so much love, safety, in a point where it's like I've never had that in my life. Like, of course my mom gave me that, right? But I've never received that from anyone besides my mom. That's a better way to put it. And I don't know, I just love this man so deeply and so genuinely. Like, I don't think I could do life without him. And I wouldn't want to do life without him at all. And so, continuing on the story. So the day he left was July 30th. So on August 1st of 2016, I had planned on, taking a trip by myself, because I've never done it. And I went to Virginia. I think it was like Norfolk, Virginia, and I stayed in a hotel. And I just kind of explored. I wanted to explore the beaches. I wanted to explore the museums. I wanted to just do me. Like, I wanted to do what I needed to do to find me, I guess. And I know you can't do that on one trip, but, I didn't think I was going to be in a relationship by this time, and I was. And Josh was like, "You should just not go to Virginia and come to Florida." And I was like, I already have the tickets booked. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I had a layover in Florida, and he was like, I can just go pick you up and blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, but who's going to refund my tickets and all of this? And he was like, I'll pay for a ticket back. And I was like, no, it's okay. Like, I'll just stay on the course that I'm on. And he was like, fine. And, we're texting back and forth. Yeah. And then so I have the trip in Virginia, and then I come back home. And this was like August, 13th, 14th. And him and I are texting and calling each other and, videoing each other and all of this. And my mom states, like, if you guys really want to be together, you guys shouldn't do long distance. And I was like, yeah, but maybe it's a good thing, so I can focus here and he can focus there, and so that way he can get stuff lined up, right? Well, tell me why this man, he moves here September 2nd of 2016. He moves here and he makes that 1,600-mile trip back down from Florida to Texas with all his stuff. And of course I knew, like, we had agreed upon it, but it's just so shocking how fast everything went and how easy everything is. I mean, he's a pain in my butt, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's so easy with him. And then a year after he moved down and us dating, we got engaged. And then a year after that, we got married. And then in 2019, I got pregnant with my first son, with my first child. So going into that, so September of 2016, he moved in. July of 2017, we got engaged. And then October of 2018, we got married. And then March of 2019, we had moved into our apartment. And as young married couples do, we had some fun, a little bit too much fun. And I got pregnant with my son. And I was the last person to know. Like, everybody else knew, like, that I was pregnant. Like, they kept asking me, are you pregnant? Are you pregnant? And I'm like, no, like, I'm pretty sure I would know. So my little brother was going into the Air Force, getting ready for BMT. And I was like, man, my hips are really hurting. And we were taking, like, family photos. And I was like, man, my hips are really hurting. Like, this is weird. And, I didn't think anything of it, but they were, like, in really bad pain. And my mom says, are you pregnant? And I'm like, no. And so my little brother was like, oh, well, watch one of you or Terry, get pregnant while I'm at BMT. And I'm like, haha, no, like, that's not gonna happen. And then fast forward a few weeks, like, I've had really bad headaches and really bad, like, it's just pounding headaches. And I've never struggled with bad headaches until my pregnancies and after I gave birth. And they were, like, so severe I had to lay down and just kind of take a deep breath. And those headaches would make me nauseous. Well, one night Josh was cooking and he dropped a noodle on the burner and it started burning. And I was like, what is that smell? And then I'm, like, laying down and I get up and run to the bathroom and I start puking my guts out. And Josh comes in and he's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Why? And he's like, I'm pretty sure you're pregnant. And I'm like, what do you mean pretty sure? And he's like, well, based off of everything that I'm seeing I think you're pregnant. And I was like, no. I was like, it's my body, I would know, right? And he's like, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure you are. And so at that point, I don't say anything to him. I grab my keys, grab my wallet. I was like, babe, I'm going to Walmart. Do you need anything? I get back. I remember I had a clear blue test because that's the only one that was there, and that's the only one, that was the cheapest one that was there. And I think this was like April 12th of 2019. And I'm like, I dipped it in the pee, and like 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds go by, and a dark blue line plus sign comes about, and I'm like, I'm just staring at it like, not even the control line has come up yet. I'm just like, okay. I was like, I was shocked, but also not shocked because of what everyone was saying. And it's just so wild to me that other people around me knew before I even knew. And I didn't even like wait to tell Josh. I literally just brought him into the bathroom and was, so look at the test. And he was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, what do you mean you know? He's like, I know, like I knew that you were pregnant. And I was like, no, you didn't. And he's like, no, I really felt like you were pregnant. Like, I just had this feeling. But I told my mom in a way that she always told us whenever we were kids, right? And I wanted it to make it special because it was the first pregnancy. It's the first grandbaby. My oldest brother and her were out. I got a confirmed blood test because, again, it's my first pregnancy. I didn't want it to be like a chemical or anything like that. So I get it confirmed, and then I get those results, and then I want to tell my mom. So at this point, Josh and I go to like Hobby Lobby, get the stuff. But my mom always told myself and my sister, if you swallow a watermelon seed, you will get pregnant. So I found this card with a watermelon with a bite out of it and then seeds all around it. And so I write in the card, I'm like, I guess I finally swallowed my watermelon seed, and in this pink little box was a pregnancy test. And I hand it to her, and she freaks out. So excited and so happy. And she's like crying and like jumping up and down, screaming, and I think that was honestly the best reaction that my family members had. And then I think my little brother, I think I just told him over the phone because he was still in BMT, and it was, he was excited. Everyone was excited. I will say though, the pregnancy was hard on me. Like both pregnancies were, but I think my first one with Joshua, it was extremely difficult. And it made me really think if I wanted a new one or not. I had so much swelling, so much swelling. I had so much pain. I had high blood pressure. Just overall, a really hard experience. And then when you have an anterior placenta, which is in the front, it makes it harder for you to feel the baby. And I was freaking out even more. I really thought that I wasn't gonna have another one. And I think it kind of traumatized my husband a little bit with, the pregnancy, the birth, married, newly parents. But overall, it was a good experience. A good experience, but very, very hard on my body. And some of it makes sense a little bit, but man, was that birth crazy. I think if I had to compare the two, my first birthing experience was very wild. Very wild. And a lot of it I don't remember. I will say that. A lot of it I don't remember. A lot of it I do. And then a good part of it my mom has on video because I had asked her to. I wish I did that for Carly's. But Carly's was so chill and laid back. 10/10 would recommend that again. And I think her labor is wanting me to have another baby, but we'll have to talk about that a different day. So with Carly, I had found out we had taken a trip to Florida in, I want to say July, something like that. Just to visit the family and, kind of, I was already feeling pretty sick, and But this was like mid-July. So then we get home and then we go back to our normal daily routines. And I remember my period being late. And this was a period where it was weird because it was late, but it didn't start right away. Or it didn't start at all. But it was late, but I didn't get a positive pregnancy test until way later. But I kept testing like a few days before, a few days after, and nothing. So I was like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to stop testing, whatever. I don't feel like disappointing myself because at that time we were trying. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to stop testing and I don't want to disappoint myself. Whenever it comes, it comes. Well, towards the end of July, like, I still didn't have a period. So I took another test. It was negative. I was like, okay, whatever. And I remember August 1st, I woke up in the middle of the night super nauseous. I was like, I cannot sleep. I'm feeling so terribly bad. Like, this has got to be like it, right? And I was like, I cannot sleep. So I wake up, I go take a pregnancy test, and I'm like waiting. And literally a faint line pops up. And I was using those easy at-home pregnancy tests. And if you guys are like TTC or trying to conceive, or if you've, had a pregnancy scare and you just bought like a whole bunch on Amazon, you guys know it's those like little cheap test strips. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, it's probably like, I'm just seeing it, right? And then I save it for Josh to see, and he was like, no, yeah, I see it. I was like, wait, you do? He's like, yeah. And so I'm like trying to shine the light on it, trying to figure out like if it's actually there or not. And I was like, okay, well, it's probably just like a faulty test. So I go and get a first response in a clear blue. I take the clear blue first. Clear blue honestly sucks nowadays, even though I used it with my son. And it came back negative, or at least it looked negative. And then I took first response, and it was pink. There was 2 pink lines, and you can obviously see it. And I'm like freaking out internally because I was a stay-at-home mom at this point, and Josh was switching jobs. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm pregnant. You don't, you're switching jobs right now. You won't start until a few weeks later. And then I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I have no source of income. So it was a little bit scary. And then, of course, I told my mom and everybody. But I kind of kept this one quiet until I knew, everything was okay. I don't know. I just had this feeling that we had to keep it to ourselves a little bit longer. And we did. And then we eventually told them, a few days later or a couple weeks later. Shortly after, I had gotten... my husband had gotten COVID, and then my son, and then me, and then my younger brother. And it was very scary, I'm not gonna lie, because I had a toddler that was still learning to talk, that didn't have COVID, that was learning to talk, that had COVID, and then I had a baby in me that wasn't even it was maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks of pregnancy that I had COVID. And I've heard there can be complications, this or that, and this was after I told my family that we were pregnant. And so this kind of confirmed why I wanted to keep it to myself, because I didn't know what was going to happen. And it was just, I was internally freaking out because I didn't know the complications that could come with it. Thank God nothing happened. My COVID symptoms were very mild. And I got lucky, I think. My son had it rough, very, very rough, and I would never want him to have it again, but unfortunately he did a few years later. Harley's pregnancy was really hard on me as well. For the most part, it was easy. I will say it was easier, but I was very nauseous all the time. My insomnia was really bad, and then towards the end, I didn't have as much swelling, but towards the end, I kept having high blood pressure, which ultimately ended up me having another C-section and having to have her early, like 3 weeks early, which again, I'd much rather have a scheduled C-section, me personally. It was more chill. You actually knew when the baby was coming. Now, I don't recommend it if there's no medical reason to. Both my kids, there was a medical reason to have it. And either way, you're still giving birth to your beautiful babies. But in my cases, I needed it, and I didn't have the option to do a VBAC or a TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after C-section, or vaginal birth after C-section. My OB was like, okay, well, you can have a vaginal if you don't have any complications with this pregnancy. If you do, then at that point you have to have a C-section. And because of my high blood pressure, like my extremely high blood pressure, I was unable to go through with the labor that I wanted, but that's okay. I was super chillaxed. I got a date. I went in. They prepped me for surgery, and then my baby was born like within a few minutes. And I will say this also, like Carly's and Joshua's finding out pregnancy and birth were completely different. Like, I think I had more troubles with the boy pregnancy, Joshua's pregnancy, than the girls. And I also feel like, me personally, my experience was that I had more issues with the boy labor than the girl labor. Now, I don't think the gender has anything to do with it as far as like laboring, but that is my experience. And by no means am I a professional in regards to the medical system, and by no means am I telling you how and what you should do. Always get a medical professional's advice, and this is just for educational purposes, and this is my experience. And just make sure to talk to your doctors before you do anything. And yeah, so that's the story of us, how we came to be. I know a lot of you, after I had mentioned that, you know, I had met my husband on a game, you guys were really interested, and so there it is. I mean, it kind of gives you a little deeper of a dive into mine and my husband's meet cute, I guess you can say. And I don't know, I love that turd, and he loves me, and he'll be stuck with me. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to see the video version of this podcast, make sure to look in the description. There will be a link to YouTube. Make sure to follow my TikTok at Janett I, Texas, and over on Instagram as well. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing, feel free to do so. And if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to comment down below. And again, thanks so much for watching and listening to the story of us. You have a great day. See you next time.